Love blasting through this berm here. Get that roost off the rear tires. That's what it's about.
Take a look at this crazy 1/7 scale off-road rig, guys. It's four-wheel drive, brushless powered. You run it on 6S. It's sure to be a beast. It's from ROCHobby. It's called the Ridge Racer U4, and FMS was kind enough to send one over to me, an East Coast guy that doesn't have a desert. Let's get it out of the box so you can check it out. So let's take a look at the all-important exterior styling. So first up, it's a Ford Bronco modified for Ultra 4 use. If you've seen Vaughn Gittin Jr.'s Ultra 4400, probably looks exactly the same, just a different livery on it. The main body section is all one piece of Lexan, and then they have screws to hold it down to the cage, so it has an inner cage for protection. Light bar in the front. You got the short grille with the LED light bar on top, and they give you the Bronco emblem. It's separate in the bag, so you got to go and apply that yourself. It is held down with body clips, so you got two in the front and then two under the rear, and it allows you to like tilt up the body so you could access the battery pack in there, but you can't fully take the body off. You have to unscrew the rear limiting straps and the sway bar. Nonetheless, easy to get to the battery pack when you're out in the field, and not too bad to work on it on the bench. Lexan interior with a molded driver helmet, some decals to just set off the look of that, and then it's got a full-size spare tire in the back. I already took the screws off in the rear so I can show you guys the inner cage. There it is, and it looks like it actually locks into the side as well, so I like that. Definitely don't like when the body panels flex out and just look awkward, so hopefully that stays in place. So the chassis layout, it's gonna look similar to some of the other desert racers that are out there, such as the Baja Ray and the UDR. Typically what they do is they have a short chassis in the center, they got independent front suspension, live rear with trailing arms, so that follows in line with some of the other popular desert racers. This one though looks really well built, starting off with the aluminum chassis plate that's gray anodized, 3mm thick. All the screws are countersunk, just like you would want. Even has an aluminum top plate and aluminum rear brace for the differential supports, and even an aluminum front top plate, aluminum brace plates for the upper suspension arm, and even a cast metal block for the lower arm. So everything's looking really good on the chassis. Large tray for the batteries. It looks like you can even put longer packs in there. There is a little bit of worry here with this rear link, you know, height-wise, but up front here, you definitely have a lot of room to put some 3S packs in. Stack those, secure them down with the Velcro straps. We got a receiver box in the back center here, and then just some simple servo posts to secure this 5th scale servo, which I'll show you in a little bit, or giant scale servo. Even has an aluminum top plate on that. But I like the look of the chassis overall. Looks pretty easy to work on. However, when I was trying to take this apart for you guys, I actually stripped out one of the screws trying to get it out. It was just way too tight, so I gotta go drill that out. So I've got minimal footage of that. So that's a bit of a bummer that the hardware stripped out. It was a hex screw. Back here, they've got aluminum brace rods for the towers, and I did notice that these sway a little bit. So I'm wondering if you guys cartwheel this thing, or if I go and cartwheel this thing, if these shock towers are gonna hold up. I mean, they look like they're well braced on the side. Just worried about that little bit of extra side-to-side flex. So the suspension setup on this is pretty trick. Starting off with the shocks, as you can see, there's 8 shock bodies on this. You got a slave shock on each corner, and then the main shock, which has a threaded body, adjustable preload collars, looks like a progressive spring, and of course they're oil filled from the factory. So this actually feels pretty good. Once we get some weight in there, I mean, that'll be the final tell on it, but looks like they're built pretty well. I don't see any oil leaking. That is always key. Unfortunately, I've got some leaking to tell you about with it. But going back to the suspension, I actually like the sweep of the arms themselves. They have some clearance in the center, drops down out at the knuckle. It's a dual wishbone style setup. You don't get any adjustability up at the top arm to adjust your camber. They do have a sway bar on the front. The upper bulkhead looks like it's got some beef to it, and then the rear pivot looks pretty solid as well. Now into the rear suspension, so we've got trailing arms. I like how they've got a composite cap on the top. So that lower trailing arm is composite. The upper links, however, look at the size of these metal links. Those are pretty huge. The rod ends, those look large as well, and then it's got steel pivot balls. Now the only thing I don't like about the rear suspension is the center pivot here. It just has a little tab that keys into the axle, and then 2 little 2mm screws to hold it in place. So I'm wondering if, you know, you do some sort of hard tumble with this, if it's going to actually break that little tab. That's my only concern when I was like taking apart this car, that I was like, that might be something to worry about. But anyway, I mean, I'm just, you know, going over this thing, nitpicking at whatever I can. Check these out, guys. They've got some limiting straps in the rear. These actually mount to the rear cage, so I had to pull that off in order to show you guys the rear of it. I like how these upper mounting points look replaceable. It does have a sway bar for the rear as well, but the lower link, that is part of the axle. And finally, in the suspension department, we have the wheels and tires. So these look like a really cool desert tire. No actual branding on it. It does have the offset style. It does have a brake disc behind it, and on that brake disc is the 17mm hex. So if you do want to go and switch out these tires, look for a wheel with a 17mm hex. The compound for the tire, these are a really hard compound rubber, and it feels like it's got a foam insert or a urethane insert in there that's pretty hard as well. So I'm thinking it's not going to expand a lot. However, I'm a little worried about the traction of it, so I'll have to see how it does. I'm actually gonna hit the sand, so these might work perfectly for that. So being a U4 racer, it's of course 4-wheel drive, and that means it's got a front, center, and rear gear differential to lay down the power, metal gears in the differentials. The center one actually has a aluminum case, which is awesome because the center differential is the one that heats up, so that's not going to fail on you. Also has a metal spur gear, of course. All the ball bearings on this are sealed, so it means you can run this thing through the mud. And then we've got CV drive axles in the front. Looks like we're going to get a lot of steering angle with those. And then in the center, they've got dog bones, and there's actually dog bones that goes out to the rear axle. And I like that they've got boots on there to protect it, especially the rear. That one's going to get all loaded up with dirt, so it's definitely cool to see that on there. And then just take a look at this rear axle. I mean, that's a really cool setup. It's actually multiple piece, so you have these 3mm screws holding the center of it together. Then you have all these 2.5mm screws holding on the axle tubes. Just got a really cool shape to it. And finally, it's got a machined aluminum motor plate that's actually part of the diff housing as well for the center. And remember before I mentioned the leak? Well, when I pulled the battery tray out to show you guys the center diff shot, I noticed a bunch of oil sitting in the bottom of the chassis. So I know these things were actually built a while ago, and they've been sitting around waiting, I believe, for the licensing to clear on this. So that's what happens when an RC isn't used for a while. Sometimes those seals will leak on you and you get a little bit of oil. It didn't look like a ton. It didn't look like everything leaked out, but I definitely noticed something. Just some of the other things I liked about the drivetrain was the output bearing here for the bevel pinion. It's got two really large bearings there to support it, so that's good to see. And then the gears themselves, they were spiral cut. So with a larger vehicle such as this, definitely like when they go with a spiral cut versus just a straight cut gear. I think it just adds a little bit of strength, and hopefully this drivetrain holds up. And finally, the electronics. So it has a jumbo size servo is what they're calling it, 30 kg. What I noticed about this though is it's such a large servo. It only has two 2mm screws holding it in, and it actually flexes a little bit. Mine actually flexed more than this out of the box, so I tightened down the screws. Might want to check for that if you pick one of these up. But they also give you mounts if you just want to put a standard servo in there. They also give you a shorter linkage over to the dual bell crank steering. There's a servo saver built into that, aluminum drag link, and then they have adjustable tie rods there, so you could adjust toe if you want. Max 8 speed controller from Hobbywing. This is a 150 amp speed controller. It's got a cooling fan on top. It does have some programmability to it. Then it uses EC5 connectors, so nice large connector on it. It's a dual connector setup. They don't give you a jumper, so you're gonna have to run dual packs if you're gonna run a 6S system, or this would probably do well on 4S as well. But motor-wise, they've got a 4274 1600 kV brushless motor, no cooling fan on that, and then the receiver, which was a 6-channel receiver, mounted inside that receiver box, just a simple clip holding down the lid, and the antenna just flops around and back. So watch when you're putting it on the body, you don't want to pinch that into something. Here's the radio system that it comes with. Looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? It's got the carbon fiber style molding highlights around the outside. Unfortunately, just a plastic steering wheel, and then all of your trims are located under this panel here. At least you could access that on-off switch from the outside. A couple dip switches there. There's your trims. Actually fairly comfortable, other than that plastic wheel. Definitely don't like that plastic wheel. They also give you some basic tools inside the box and instruction manual, a couple decals to put on it. You guys already saw it all styled up, so now it's just time to throw a battery pack in here and see how it rips.
RC drivers, I've been dying to drive the Ridge Racer. Every time I planned to go out and drive it, it would snow. I got a clear day today. It's 30 degrees though. That'll be a good durability test for the composites. But man, look at this thing. It is a beast. It's on 6S. So this sand is super soft, so these tires are really digging in along with the weight. There's a lot of weight transition when you go through the corner on this, so you really have to back off. It's got a lot of steering though. Once you get this thing straightened out, it gets some airtime. But I love watching that suspension work. That trailing arm setup with the dual shock, that's pretty awesome. So I think the center diff definitely needs a bit heavier of an oil. Once I really punch it, I could hear the power transferring. A lot of wheel spin in the front, see right there? Wow, that's a good looking rig. A lot of suspension movement. It is ripping through that sand. Awesome to see another big desert truck out there. You gotta have options, right? Let that thing move. So again, guys, it's on 6S. Let's check out this speed. It's got some decent speed to it. Maybe I could go up another tooth. For this spot, it's just about right. Oh man, that was a hard hit into the sand. Man, that was an awesome run.
Let me give you my final thoughts. It was actually well worth the wait to drive this. Wish it actually happened a bit sooner because the truck is a lot of fun. It gives you that desert truck experience, the excitement of the suspension dropping out of the rear of the truck, the dirt flying off the tires as you go through the berms. It definitely has a lot of speed to it, plenty of steering. It's a great handling truck and it seems to hold up really well. I mean, you know, in that soft sand, you're not gonna do a lot of damage to the truck. I did hear the differential kind of sending power to the front. With these hard tires, you don't see it balloon, but the tires do have good traction. As you saw, it rolled over a few times. So overall, really good truck. Now, the big question here I think a lot of people have is it better than the UDR or the Baja Ray? Well, you know, it's a 7-scale truck for $550, and it does give you that action that you want out of a desert truck. It's got a really good look to it. I think it's got some decent detail. Love the spare tires sticking out of the back and the LED lights on it. It's got a lot of power. It's really well equipped, and for the price, again, I mean, I think it's a pretty good deal. The UDR is like $750, and the Baja Ray is $550, but that only runs on 3S, so it's not a true comparison there. The power systems are a bit different, but I think this is a great desert truck. No real big complaints about it yet. I did have that leaking differential, but after driving it, I want to put a heavier center diff oil in there. So there's just a little cleanup involved, a little maintenance to swap out that diff oil. The other thing is the battery tray, although it looks very big, it doesn't fit 2 3S 5,000 milliamp packs, and that's kind of the standard. You need a thinner pack. I wound up going with a 6S Turnigy pack and putting a jumper plug in. The other thing to take into consideration is aftermarket parts support. You're going to find more for the other two trucks than you are for this one right now. And I know this has been around for a while under a different brand, and you know, people just call out the other brand, don't say anything else about it. I don't know why they do that. FMS is supporting this one, and I hope that, you know, they get this out there to where there's going to be more aftermarket support for it. And speaking of support, FMS has really stepped up on the support of this from what I could see. They have a program where if they can't supply you with the parts, they're giving you a discount. That's the time I'm recording this video. So they're backing this better than before, what we've seen before with this rig. I think it's a fun truck, especially if you're looking for the desert experience. It's got good scale detail. I'll have links for it in the video description below.